Jimmy Thang from Maximum PC here at E3 2015. I'm here speaking with Palmer Luckey. We're at Oculus VR's booth, and you guys have finally shown your, first consumer version to the world. What has that been like?
It's been really good. We're here at E3. We're showing the final version of the Consumer Rift. It's going to be shipping to consumers and gamers and enthusiasts everywhere next I almost said the date. In Q1 2016, we're going to be opening up pre-orders later this year. We've also been showing Oculus Touch, which are 6 Degree of Freedom 3D motion controllers. Those we're going to be opening up pre-orders later this year around the same time of the Rift. We'll be shipping a little bit after the Rift. We're also showing off 9 different titles that we've been working with some studios like Insomniac and High Voltage on. We have also announced about 20 partnerships last week with developers. We're going to be showing more games as we get closer to the launch. And we have 9 games playable on the show floor. So that's been really good, getting people to finally see what these devs have been building for the last few years.
Awesome, and you kind of touched upon it just a little bit, but is there a date in mind that's set? I know you said Q1, but...
There is a date in mind, but right now we're just saying Q1. We'll let everyone know a more final date once we start taking your money.
And the Oculus Touch controller is coming in the first half of the year. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. It'll be coming in the first half of 2016, probably just a bit after the Rift ships.
I know you said you worked on the controller aspect of the experience, right? And does it sort of kill you a little bit that you can't ship it together?
I mean, it's not that we can't ship it together. We could do that, so it's a decision that I'm totally behind. We've been working with a lot of developers for over a year, some of them even going 2 years back working on their VR content. And almost all of that content is built around gamepads. And that's just the reality of what's been available in the VR space and then the genres that people have been building games for, whether it's driving simulators, space fighter simulators, or platformer games. And so one of the most common requests that devs had for us, they're like, please make it so that every person who buys the Rift is able to play my game without buying any additional hardware. So it's not a huge cost to add a gamepad to the Rift's bundle. It made sense to add it so that devs could be confident that they were going to be successful if they targeted that gamepad. But we are shipping Touch, shortly thereafter, so that for those types of experiences that are out there for that, people are going to be able to do those. Devs are going to start working on them. But it's going to take time, I think, to get experiences for motion controllers that are as polished as the ones for gamepads. I mean, gamepads have decades of work behind them with known genres. People know how to make them work for driving and flying and platforming. Motion controllers, people don't really have as much of a good idea. So it's going to take many months, maybe even a couple years before we see games that are as polished as the gamepad-based games that we're seeing right now for motion controllers. And at that point, it would make a lot more sense to bundle something with the Rift.
So I haven't had a chance to try out the controllers myself. Hopefully I can do it right after this conversation. But I know that the prototype is codenamed Half Moon.
That's right.
Would you say it's near final, or is it still in sort of beta? Like where are you guys at with the controller?
So it's pretty close to final. There's a few tweaks that we're making in the design, but what you see is largely representative of what we're going to be shipping next year. There's a few features we haven't shown in the software that we're showing off at the show. So there's going to be like some industrial design changes, some slight ergonomic changes. There'll be a couple tweaks on the features, but what you're seeing at the show is about what you're going to get.
For those that aren't familiar with the controller, can you sort of walk us through what the controller's like?
Sure. So Touch is a controller that we designed to make it feel like your virtual hands in the game are actually your real hands. So we didn't want it to feel like you're just manipulating a tool or a wand or something in the game. We want it to feel like your hand is actually there. So we've designed it to be extremely ergonomic with your hand in a resting position when you're holding it. It has a loop around it that's used for tracking, but also to make the center of gravity right in the center of your hand, so that when you're moving it around, it's like you feel inertia, like you're holding a stick or a sword. It's just rotating about the central point of your own hands. It has sensors in it that allow us to, in addition to tracking the position and orientation of your hand, track the movement of your finger. So I can track whether I'm pointing at you or giving you a thumbs up, or I can flick things. That really makes a huge difference in the experience compared to what you can get over most other tracked controllers. And we've also integrated some traditional inputs. We have 2 buttons, a couple triggers, and an analog stick. And that means that you can do combo experiences. For example, you can pick up a gun with your hand and then use the trigger to fire it. Or you're able to pick up a remote controller and drive a RC tank around on a table. And we thought that that combination of traditional inputs and these new natural VR inputs together in one controller was really critical to letting game developers make experiences that are able to run the full gamut of what they want to build.
Some people, I can understand why you'd want to bundle a controller with every headset, but some people are worried about sort of fragmentation.
Sure.
Are you guys concerned about that?
Fragmentation is somewhat inevitable. I mean, the way we look at it is what is the best thing that we can do for our game developers and for our game consumers. And what would be a lot worse than any kind of fragmentation would be to say, hey, all you game devs who've been working for years on gamepad games, that's not going to work. We're actually going to ship with a totally different input. I mean, that's the type of thing that really leads to fragmentation. You saw a lot of blowback from developers when Microsoft stopped bundling Kinect with Xbox One, for example, because they had been relying on that being part of the bundle. They said everybody's going to have this. You make a game, everyone's going to be able to use it. And going back on that can put devs in a really bad scenario. And there was always going to be fragmentation. It's not like if we bundled the controllers, every game was going to use touch. I mean, a lot of games, it doesn't even make sense to use touch. Your gamepad is going to be the better input. For example, Eve Valkyrie, or a platformer game, it's more comfortable to have a two-handed controller that you can use for operating analog sticks and a bunch of complex inputs and buttons at the same time. We weren't trying to make touch be a perfect universal controller for every type of game. And the thing is, there's other people that are building motion controllers too. If people are going to make a game for motion controllers, they're probably going to target the lowest common denominator between all of the different controllers if they want to target all of the platforms. If they're making something for the Rift that uses, like our finger tracking features, that was already going to be its own separate thing. And there was already going to be fragmentation between what we're doing and what Sony is doing, what other companies are doing. But I feel pretty confident in our solution being the best.
So, I guess right before up until I think Valve announced their motion control system, it was sort of like the Wild West of input for VR. Have you guys done a lot of? I'm sure you have done a lot of testing. Have you done any weird oddball stuff out there? If so, can you name some?
Oh man, yeah, we've done a lot of oddball stuff. I mean, we've experimented with everything. We've done gloves, we've done strap-ons, we've done game pads, things that split apart, things that transform. We've tried almost everything you can do in a gamepad, trying to figure out what we were going to do.
This is it. This is the best thing according to your research and data.
It's not necessarily. I mean, there's never going to be a best for some things. If it depends on what parameters you're setting for determining best. If your number one thing is tracking fingers and their perfect movement, then there's going to be, it could be that a glove or some kind of computer vision based tracking system is going to be better. If you're trying to make something that's a perfect gun controller, there's going to be a better gun controller than touch. If you're doing a racing game, obviously touch isn't going to be the best way to do that. It's going to be with a real steering wheel. I guess there's no perfect input for all games, but I think that touch is the right set of compromises that will result in the best overall trade-offs between a wide variety of different games.
You mentioned, the index finger, I think, and is it going to support other fingers as well, or is it just the pointer finger?
So in this demo, we're actually there's a trigger for your middle finger, but because of the ring and a few other technical things, we're not tracking that. But we can track your middle finger, we can track your thumb, we can track which buttons you're actually touching on the face. But right now, that's all we're talking about. Pinky tracking isn't particularly useful. In fact, both of these fingers are better.
Dr. Evil thing.
That is true. We will not be able to effectively do that. But these fingers don't often do all that much. It makes sense to kind of slave them to what you're doing with your middle finger, and because those are the fingers where you're really doing most of your interactions.
Could we one day see Oculus package the Oculus Touch together, or is it always going to ship with the controller, or is it too early to tell right now?
We're not ruling it out, but right now we're focused on launching the Rift with the Xbox One gamepad, because that is what most of our launch titles are supporting, and a lot of the titles going into 2016. We're investing a lot in content for Touch as well, so we're helping developers start making games with them right now. But right now, it makes the thing that makes the most sense is to focus on bundling a gamepad.
Cool. Lots of people are worried that there might be occlusion with the controller and stuff like that if you turn your back against it. Sure. With there being one sensor. Sure. Lots of people want to know: can you buy two sensors? Is that even an issue to worry about to begin with, or?
I mean, we're actually showing two sensors in that room, so our system is capable of working with multiple sensors. It's all just a matter of how you want to set it up. I think most people, like, we're not pushing for people to set up really large volume tracking spaces, because most developers we've talked to aren't interested in building games that are going to have a very limited number of people who are able to play them. For example, if I'm a game dev and I make a game that requires me to clear out my living room and track me across my living room, you're already targeting a narrow, just by making a VR game, you're targeting a narrow subset of a subset of users. People who have powerful PCs who are interested in VR gaming. Cutting it again to people who are both of those things and also willing to clear out their living room leaves you with a really small market. And you might say, well, why not just make it better with a large tracking area? A lot of these people are worried that if they make games that are significantly improved by a large tracking volume, that people who don't have the room for that are just gonna say, they're gonna say, I'm not gonna buy that game. I mean, I'm only gonna play if I get the full experience. I'm gonna spend my money on a game that actually is targeting what I'm trying to play. So we're capable of using multiple sensors. We're capable of fixing these occlusion problems. But for the most part, we're focused on one sensor with a very wide coverage angle, and just people being able to use that really easily.
What is the coverage angle?
So that depends on a lot of factors, and so we're not giving a number, not because we're trying to be cagey. It's just because we don't want to. We'd rather under-promise and over-deliver. It's pretty wide.
So 1 feet.
Yes, 1 feet. I mean, you can try it out in there. We've got it set up, and you can try step, like we've set up a mat in there that you can stand on. Our tracking isn't limited to that mat area. It's just we've set that up because we think that's kind of representative of the type of standing VR experience that most devs we've talked to are targeting, not just on Oculus but on other platforms too.
What about in terms of distance? How far out can you walk away from it? Or are you just tethered to the cable? Is that the limit?
The cable is largely the limit. I mean, if you could try the demo in there, like you can walk to the edges of the room and the back of the room, and that's a 12 by 12 room, and you run out of space. But yeah, you run out of cable pretty fast, and that's another big problem when you're doing trying to do VR in a big room and you're actually walking around, is you start to twist your cable around, you start to step over your cable, you could potentially trip. But if you're not worried about tripping, and even if you're like willing to hang it from the ceiling, just going around in circles in a room actually tangles up the cable, and that actually is not super great for the conductors in the cable either. So again, that's not something that we're trying to get people to do.
So I have a reader question. Will Toybox be open source, and will you guys provide it to the developers, as an example of how to best use the controller?
Maybe not Toybox specifically, because like what we're showing here is just a subset of all of the interactions that we've been designing with and experimenting with, but something like that, yeah. Like it might not be this exact demo, but it's going to be something much like it, so that developers, kind of like we did with Tuscany, so that people can modify it, work with it, and learn from it, and build off it.
Okay, actually, I had one more question if I could. It's just kind of an interesting one. It's tangential. So, porn for VR. This is a fun one. Are you guys embracing it, or like, how do you guys feel about it?
So we're not going to be distributing any kind of adult content through the official Oculus store, because we're curating that and trying to keep it to a limited set of experiences, kind of following the industry standards for what's acceptable and what's not. But the Rift is an open platform, so you can buy content directly from developers. You can buy content from other sources. You can run that on the Rift, no problem. So we don't have. You can run things on your Rift without us necessarily endorsing them or making money off of it.
Not like I'm a pervert or anything like that, but it's just porn took VHS to the next level, and I think that with VR it could probably do the same. So, anyways, thanks for your time, Palmer, and for more yeah, thanks for having me. For more coverage on VR and Oculus, check out MaximumPC.com.